Up on this episode, the Warriors blew their second 20-plus point lead in the space of 3 games against the LA Clippers on Saturday, but it brought a different feel to that of the one against the Sacramento Kings earlier in the week. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. About 24 hours removed now from the Warriors' 11th loss of the season through 20 games, another heartbreaking 113-112 loss to the LA Clippers, where they only ever trailed in the final 8.9 seconds of the game. This is Steve Kerr's 10th year as head coach of the Golden State Warriors, and before this week, they had lost just 4 games when leading by 20-plus points, and now we've had 2 in the space of 3 games. Obviously, the Kings in the final in-season tournament group game on Tuesday, where the Warriors led 72-48, only to lose by, you guessed it, 1 point. And then yesterday, of course, leading 70-48 early in the third quarter against the Clippers, only to lose by 1 point. It's a new level of heartbreak for the Warriors, but this one feels a little bit different, I think, to the Kings one. I think there was some genuine frustration in both. Steve Kerr said after yesterday's game that this one against the Clippers felt a little bit more frustrating because he thought they deserved to win that game. I agree and disagree to an extent. I do agree that they probably did deserve to win that game. I think the Warriors, on the whole, played pretty well in that game. But I'm a little less frustrated probably because of it, just because there wasn't the self-inflicted wounds like there was against the Kings, where you had the plethora of turnovers, over 20 turnovers and over 40 free throws conceded. So the fact that the Warriors played pretty well yesterday against the Clippers, I can look back and think, we just got beaten by a better team in the end. And yes, Steve might look at that as thinking it's more frustrating because we deserve to win, but I might actually go the other way and say it's a little less frustrating that there weren't necessarily the self-inflicted wounds like there was against the Kings. But it's unbelievable to have these 2 games in the space of 3 games where you could have had a 3-0 week. And I'm actually probably pretty positive and more optimistic on this Warrior team over the last 3 games than I was before it, with how they've played throughout the majority of these 3 games. The Warriors, as they did in Sacramento, as they did at Chase Center in the first matchup against the Clippers earlier in the week, they played a great first half. They led by 19 at halftime. They shot basically 55% from the floor, 55% from three-point range in the first half. Of course, still minus Andrew Wiggins, Gary Payton II, and Chris Paul, 3 big outs. Obviously, the turnovers were limited again, 13 for the game, which I think is pretty good. Obviously, wasn't quite to the level of the 7 they had in the first matchup against the Clippers where they won. But 13 is not too bad. You take that. I think going into the game, if you ask me, Warriors will have 13 turnovers for the game. You take that. And then they had 10 more free throw attempts as well than the Clippers yesterday. So if you just take those 2 statistics, 13 turnovers, 10 more free throw attempts, I would have thought the Warriors would have won the game. Wasn't to be. Again, I think credit has to go to the Clippers for how they played in the second half. They made the big plays down the stretch. I think their stars really got involved. James Harden, that might have been his best kind of stint or period as a Clipper in that third quarter, where he started to really take control of the game. I think he went in less than 120-second or less than a 2-minute stretch. He had 8 points and a couple of assists, and I think he might have had 13 to 15 points for the quarter. I think that was probably his best stretch as a Clipper so far. And then Kawhi Leonard, he got going with some big mid-range buckets in the fourth quarter. And of course, Paul George at the end there making that 3 over Clay to sink Warrior hearts. Again, very disappointing, but I think credit does have to go for the Clippers with the way they were able to play offensively in the second half, but probably more importantly, the way they were able to play defensively. They limited the Warriors to 45 points in the second half, which ultimately got them back into the game and ultimately to the victory. And again, I think credit has to. I think that they're a top 7 defense in the league. Credit has to go to them. The Warriors perhaps could have done more offensively, but again, it wasn't as if they were just turning the ball over willy-nilly or anything like that. They got some good looks. They just missed some. That happens in basketball. ultimately it's a make or miss league, and that's what we saw. So a few takeaways from this game. I just want to talk about kind of Draymond and his 3-point shooting, and of course the last shot the Warriors got. So Paul George makes a three to put the Clippers up by 113, 112. Warriors have a timeout in this scenario like they didn't the other day against the Kings. Out of the timeout, Steph gets the inbound, has Kawhi on him. And again, credit has to go to Kawhi for how he guarded Steph in the final quarter of that game. So Steph had a really, really, really good first half and had a little flurry to end the half where I think the Warriors went up 16 or 17. The Clippers got it back to 10 or 11. And then Steph put his foot on the gas and got it back up to 19. And that should have been a pivotal part of the game. I think he had 18 points in the first half. And then ultimately in the last 15 minutes of the game, he has 2 points on, I think, 0 of 5 shooting. He made 2 free throws, and that was it. And Kawhi took the role of guarding Steph and did a fantastic job. Steph tried to drive left. Now you can question whether or not he should have tried to pull up for a midi or continue to try to make a left-hand layup or whatever else. In the end, he decided to kick out to Draymond for a corner three. Russ kind of closed out pretty well to him, got a fair contest, and Draymond left it short, and the Clippers win the game. And as I said, they're only in front for the final 8.9 seconds. So it is what it is there, but I think it does go to show that although Draymond is shooting the ball exceptionally well so far this season, that should be still seen as a bonus rather than something the Warriors and Steve Kerr should be relying upon. Obviously, that final possession, they are not drawing up that play to get a Draymond Green corner three. And Steph's kicking that out of necessity rather than desire. And so even if Draymond had, which he did, he went 4 or 5, probably his hottest, I was looking like probably his hottest shooting stretch, like the first 8 minutes of that game, he goes 4 or 5 from deep. He went 4 or 4 in the second quarter of Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. And I think since then, we haven't seen a shooting period like it from Draymond, where he makes 4 threes in the space of 8 minutes and he's absolutely drilling them. I don't know what's happened, how this has shifted, but he's shooting 47.2% on 3 so far this season, on 3 attempts per game, which is the most attempts he's taking since that 2015-16 season, which over a full season is still his career high, 38.8% from 3 on that season. And as I said, in that Game 7 of the 2016 Finals, he went 6 of 8 from deep, 32 points. Was a legendary performance, would have been even more so had the Warriors obviously won. But something's clearly shifted here because in the last 7 seasons after that 15-16 season and before this one, he shot anywhere between 27 and 30.8% from 3-point range. Obviously, he's plummeted completely to the point where teams no longer guard him whatsoever. And to be fair, they're still not guarding him, and that's what allowed him to take advantage in that first 8 minutes against the Clippers yesterday. Made 4 or 5 from deep. Ends up leading him to 21 points, which is his first 20-point regular season game since 2019 Christmas Day. So we're talking about basically 4 years since he had a 20-point regular season game. And he played really well. There's no doubt about that. Teams still aren't guarding him, that's for sure. And I still think going forward, it'll take a while here till teams actually do. But obviously, it's not something that the Warriors should be relying upon. You know, getting a Draymond Green corner 3 to win the game is not what you want, and is certainly what the Clippers wanted. They wanted anyone basically but Steph or probably Clay to take that shot. And unfortunately, Draymond comes up short, and, I think it goes to show that his shooting right now, as good as it is, and I think it looks great, he's really confident in it. It's fantastic. And as long as he's left wide open, he should be taking them and hopefully making them at a good clip. Now, I don't think he's going to maintain at 47.2%, but I think there's a good chance he could maintain at 40%. And that is a huge thing for the Warriors. But I still think you'd see that as a bonus rather than, the Warriors aren't going into games thinking, oh, we really need Draymond to make a couple of threes at least here in this game to be able to win it. So it's not something to be relying upon. It's a bonus. It's fantastic. I think once, if he gets to a point where teams are actually having to guard him, then that is probably what makes more of a difference than him just actually making the open threes right now. Because once teams start guarding him, then that adds a whole new wrinkle to the Warrior offense and what they can do in terms of their spacing, in terms of what Steph and Clay and Wiggs can do off of that. So I think that's the point where it's going to be really interesting to see if we can get to, because I think that's going to be, as I said, way more important than him necessarily just making and taking the open ones right now, because at the moment, teams are still wanting to be able to do that. They're living with Draymond Green threes. The Clippers did it yesterday, and ultimately it didn't work in the first quarter. The Warriors built a double-digit lead pretty early on the back of Draymond's 4 threes. They got up 22 points, but the Clippers ended up coming back. Draymond didn't make a three after that. I did like the fact he kind of took advantage of the threats, I suppose, that Steph and Clay posed. Had a couple of fake dribble handoffs into layups. So 21-point game was absolutely fantastic. The Warriors needed it in that game. Steph ended up with just 22 for the game. Moses also added 21, his season high as well. So there's a lot of things to like about that Warrior performance. You get season highs from Draymond and Moses, 13 turnovers, 10 more free throw attempts, a fantastic first half. You shoot nearly 55% from the floor and three. The shooting as a team is really coming along across the last 7 or 8 games here, which I think is important and why I'm optimistic going forward, because they shot the ball horrifically to start the season. Now they're coming back to being one of the better three-point shooting teams in the league, which I think they obviously need to be. But I think it goes to show that the margin for error here for the Warriors, and for most teams in the league, I should say, is so small that I think we should acknowledge that you can play well and you can look back again and think, geez, we played really well there and we didn't do a lot wrong, and yet we still lost. And you just need to acknowledge that the other team was better. And I think that goes for the Warriors. I think that goes for most teams around the league, because the margin for error, the competitiveness, I suppose, across the whole league is really tight. And I suppose for a lot of fans, you may point to, well, that means that, do you try and make a trade here? Do you try and get a genuine second star next to Steph? Because that opens up your margin for error. Right now, the Warriors, if they play perfect basketball, they could beat almost every team in the league on any given day, I would say. Like, they can still beat pretty much any team. But if they're slightly off, they could almost lose to every single team as well. So the margin for error is just so small in this league right now. And obviously adding a second star, making a move where you trade a few of your young guys or whatever else, and get a secondary guy next to Steph, that opens up your margin for error. That allows you to have games where you're not necessarily perfect, but you can still win them. And I suppose that's something that Mike Dunleavy Jr. in the front office will be weighing up here as we get closer to February's deadline. Do they want to do that? Because obviously it improves your chances of winning a championship for starters, but just in the regular season, it opens up your margin for error, which is just so tight right now with how competitive the league is. Draymond, I just want to mention his comments after the game as well. He said that the Warriors have to learn how to win, and this group in particular needs to learn how to win, which I agree with. I mean, he's not wrong. The Warriors have had 5 games here that they've lost by less than 4 points, and that doesn't include Chet Holmgren's buzzer-beating 3 a couple of weeks ago that sent the game to overtime, which the Warriors ultimately lost by 7. So really, that's 6 games that the Warriors could have easily won. And instead, they've gone the other way. And I mean, they've had a couple. They obviously had the Clay game winner against Sacramento. They had the Steph layup winner over against the Thunder in Oklahoma. So they've had a couple of close ones they've been on the right side of. But more often than not so far this season, they're losing these close games. And to me, it actually felt inevitable a couple of minutes out, with a couple of minutes remaining in that Clipper game yesterday, that, hey, the Warriors are going to lose this game. They're going to find a way. And then, a minute 20 left, Paul George commits that take foul, or clear path foul, against Moses Moody. Moses goes to the line, knocks down 2. The Warriors are up 5 with possession and less than 90 seconds to play, and you think, geez, surely they're winning this game here, surely. And of course, they just can't. Like, it's really becoming an issue. And Dray's right, they've got to learn how to win. However, I think that's a little bit of a cop-out. Him saying this group needs to learn how to win, because when you look back at all of these games, I think you'll find that the majority of blame for the late game disappointments come from Steph, Dray, Clay, three guys that have played 12 years together. They come from Steve Kerr and his late game decision making as a coach, head coach for this is 10th season. So it is the experienced players and coach at the franchise that are making the errors down the stretch that are sometimes costing the Warriors these games, rather than, Moses Moody and Brandin Podziemski are on the floor. And in the last 3 minutes of that game, I'm not looking at anything they've done as fatal mistakes as to why the Warriors lost that game. I mean, Moses missed a free throw with 40 seconds to play. Okay, that's not great. It would have been nice if he'd made both. But aside from that, in general play, I don't think there was anything that those two guys did where I'm looking at and thinking, geez, if we just had another, if Chris Paul was out there or something, if we had another experienced guy out there, we win that game. Now, maybe there was something, some of the intricacies of the game that I might not necessarily pick up on that Steve and, basketball minds like Dray would pick up on, where maybe Moses or Brandin did do something that the team didn't want to happen in that scenario. But, I mean, there's some obvious things as well in terms of, if you go back to the Kings game, the Steph and Dray turnovers in the final minute, they were just the killers in that game. And then you go yesterday's game, the last 3 field goal attempts were taken by Clay, were taken by Steph, and then obviously the final one with Dray, all misses. So those 3 guys there, the 3 veteran core players. The decision to, Warriors up for 38.8 seconds to go, in a great position to win that game. There's a timeout. Steph is taken out for defensive purposes, and Steve brings in Corey Joseph. And again, I don't have anything against Corey Joseph, but in that situation, you've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George as the 2 biggest threats for the Clippers. Maybe Jonathan Kuminga, just maybe, JK might have been a better option, better suited to be out there with his length, athleticism, defensive capability to guard one of those 2 guys. And instead, PG gets the ball, hands off to Kawhi, and they get a layup within 3 seconds, which proves crucial, really critical in the Clippers being able to execute a 2-for-1 in that scenario. Steph goes down the other end, misses a jumper, and then obviously PG comes back with the game-winning 3. That layup, to get that layup within 3 seconds was huge, because you look at that and you think if the Warriors can contain them for 10 to 12, 14 seconds on that possession, then you're nearly getting to a situation where the Clippers would have to foul and play the free throw game down the stretch to have a chance of winning. So I just thought that was a disastrous coaching decision from Steve to put Corey Joseph out there and to keep JK, who should be easily in your top 5 defenders, especially Andrew Wiggins and Gary Payton II are not playing. And yet Jonathan Kuminga can't get out there when you need a defensive stop. That made little sense to no sense at all. And so you're looking at some of these mistakes are made from the 3 core players that have played together for 12 years, who have won 4 championships together, who have been led by the head coach for the last 10 years. They're the ones making the mistakes, not the young guys. And so learning how to win as a group, well, I mean, Draymond, you've learned how to win over the last 12 years. You've won 4 NBA championships. Doesn't get any more winning than that. So how come you guys, the veteran players, can't close out these games? Why? And if you look at the whole narrative and the whole outlook on the Warriors right now, if you take those 6 games that they were certainly in and you split them 3-3, I'm not saying you have to go 6-0. You can lose some close games, that's fine. But if you go 3-3 in those 6 games, instead of being 9-11 and 11th in the Western Conference, you're 12-8 and you're 4th in the Western Conference. How much of a difference does that actually make? How much of a difference? So it is incredibly frustrating, but it also, at the same time, shows I think the Warriors are close here. They're not far away. They are 11th in the West, yes. It doesn't look great. But again, if they just won a few of these games they should have, then they're in such a different spot. And as it is right now anyway, they're only 3 games from 4th as it is. So it's still early in the season. We're a quarter of the way through. There's plenty of time here. And I think the last few games should actually offer you some positivity and some optimism about what they can do moving forward. You get Portland on Wednesday. You should get Wiggs and CP3 back, I would assume, for that one. You should almost lock that. Well, the Trailblazers have had a couple of decent wins recently, but you should be able to lock that in as a win. The Warriors have obviously had a tough schedule through the first 20 games. Hopefully that'll obviously open up. And, there's still a chance for them here. They're not a guaranteed play-in tournament team, I don't think. I think they can still be a top 6 playoff team, but it just goes to show you how competitive the Western Conference is, the lack of margin for error that the Warriors have, and the inability to close games here is becoming a real issue. And I think it's a little bit of a cop-out for Draymond to say, we just need to learn how to win as a group. Well, no, you've got 3 players closing games that have won 4 championships together. That in itself should be enough to win some of these games. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to, outside, I suppose, the Clay game winner and the Steph game winner earlier in the season. The last thing I just wanted to touch on, I just wanted to give a shout out to Moody, who played one of his best NBA games ever, I'd imagine. Yesterday, had a season high 21 points, 5 rebounds, couple of assists, couple of steals. This is 2 or 3, 4 games in a row now where he's played really well. Obviously, the last 2 games stepping in for Wiggs and starting at that small forward spot. And I just wonder now for him, and this is I'm kind of piggybacking off something that Zach Lowe wrote about for ESPN a couple of days ago, even before yesterday's game against the Clippers, whether or not he's the missing link here for the Warriors. Because once Wiggs comes back, once CP comes back, once they're at full health, there's still a huge question mark on what is actually the Warriors' best lineup. Because if we lock in Steph, Clay, and Dray, right, that's the 3 that are guaranteed to be on the floor. And even, a lot of fans have been questioning whether Clay should be on the floor late in games. But I think it's fair to say Steve has trust in him that he'll be closing 99% of games. If you've got those 3, I think I've got optimism that Wiggs will return to somewhere near, a productive 2-way player, let's say, where he will definitely be closing games as well, mostly because of defensive purposes more than anything. But I think he's starting to shoot. His last 5 games, he shot 50% from 3. I think he's starting to feel it and starting to feel more confident in his 3-point shot and his shot in general. A few of his mid-range jumpers have been nice. So I think Wiggs is on his way back, which is good. And I think you can lock him in most games as that fourth closer. Even though obviously at the start of the season we saw him benched late in games in favor of Chris Paul, Kevon Looney, and whatever else. So if you've got those 4, then that leaves who's the 5th guy? Is it Chris Paul? Well, obviously with him out there, the Warriors are incredibly small, give up something defensively and rebound-wise. But then your other options, and this is something I read on Twitter the other day, the difference between the Warriors' 3rd best player and their 10th best player is incredibly minimal. So there's so many different options here for closing lineups. And ultimately it might just end up being, who's playing well on the night and who the opposition is and whatever else. But I think it is important to kind of work out what your best 5 is, especially if the Warriors are to make the playoffs. CP3 gives up, you're incredibly small, you're giving up something defensively and rebounding-wise. If you go big and you go Loon, then you're obviously giving up something offensively with him as a non-shooting threat. If you go JK, I think JK would be the perfect one. He just hasn't taken the leap like we expected, and I think that's unfortunate because I think, heading into the season, he kind of presented as the perfect fit as that guy between Wiggs and Draymond as another, athletic, big forward to fit in there. He just hasn't taken the leap, unfortunately. It is what it is. He played well against the Clippers in the first matchup. I think only played 15 minutes yesterday, made a few more errors. Obviously had that big dunk over Tice in the 4th quarter, which was nice, but otherwise not a great JK game. If you have him out there, it's a non-shooting threat. If you have GP2 out there, it's a non-shooting threat. So, if you have Saric out there, that gives you size and shooting, but he's a bit of a liability defensively. So there's so many different options here, but in every instance, they kind of give you something, but they're also giving up something, right? Whether they're almost one-way players. They're either bringing you offense or they're bringing you defense. and they're a liability on either end of the floor. I think Moody might be the one here who should be the fifth guy in that lineup because he gives you the best of the size, 6'6", big wingspan, fairly athletic, gives you some defense, and then obviously gives you the shooting and the offense as well. And I've actually been pretty impressed with some of, like, especially the last couple of games with more opportunity. I've been slightly impressed with some of Moses' takes to the rim and some of his ability to score in different ways rather than necessarily knocking down threes. I mean, I think he went 2 of 5 from 3 yesterday, which is great, 40%. But the fact he was able to get to 21 points, he got to the rim 10 times yesterday. So I'm really liking his aggressiveness. I'm liking his ability to score in different ways rather than just being catch and shoot threat, which I think oftentimes when he's bottled up into just playing 12, 15 minutes here and there, then that's what he kind of becomes. I think with the greater opportunity, with the greater playing time, I think we're seeing him spread his wings a little bit and kind of prove to Steve and prove to us even as fans that, hey, I'm not just a catch and shoot threat. I can put the ball on the floor. I can get to the rim. I can draw fouls. I can get to the free throw line, and all these different other wrinkles to his game that we didn't necessarily think he had. So Zach Lowe really pointed out a great line here that group has played 33 minutes together so far this season. The Steph, Clay, Moody, Wiggs, Dray. They've got a net rating of 18.5, which is really, really good in 33 minutes together. Small sample size, sure, but that is the most of any Warrior lineup this season that's played at least 15 minutes per game. So once Wiggs comes back, once CP, GP2, once the Warriors are at full health, I think I would really like to see Moses as that fifth guy next to the 4 kind of core players going forward here, and at least trying that out more, because on the 33 minutes, it shows that they have been really productive together and they deserve more opportunity together. And I think Moses, you couldn't have asked any more out of him in what he's done over these past couple of games as a starter. The same could be said, out of all those options I mentioned, I didn't mention Brandin Podziemski. And he's becoming a big factor. He played over 36 and a half minutes yesterday, which was second behind Steph. He played 5 seconds less than Steph did. A rookie guard, 19th overall pick, in a big game against the Clippers on a Saturday afternoon, played 36 and a half minutes. Unbelievable. And you know what? He played well. He got cooked a few times by Harden in the third quarter. He'll learn from it. That's fine. He made some big plays on both ends of the floor. He stripped Harden on 1 or 2 occasions. Made a couple of threes again. Got to the rim. Like he just, as I said on last episode, he does a bit of everything. It's been fantastic. And honestly, there's a couple of points here. So the first point is, well, could he be the fifth guy in that closing lineup? I don't think so. I'm not going to go that far and say he's, going to be a prominent option. He might be every now and again. Like, I'm not disregarding him from the whole conversation either. But the other thing for me here, which is probably more poignant, as we go forward closer to the February deadline, is his play making Chris Paul more expendable from a trade perspective? I might argue yes. And this is going to be the interesting thing, because CP has been fantastic for the Warriors, I think. I think he's played pretty well, aside from some of his shooting issues really early in the season. I think he's been good for Golden State. And I think the trade Jordan Poole for Chris Paul has been good for the Warriors, even if the Warriors have missed some of Jordan Poole's dynamic scoring ability here and there. So I've got no real issue with CP3 at all. I'm not clamoring for him to be traded or get off the team. However, if you look at these last couple of games where they've missed him, I think they missed him in the Kings game. I think they missed him there, just with the turnover issues that the Warriors had. But in these last 2 games against the Clippers, Podziemski's done a huge job and done really, really well, to the point where I'm not sure actually how much the Warriors have missed CP3 at all. And it feels like the Warriors are playing at a bit of a faster pace in these last 2 games against the Clippers. There's a little bit more dynamic nature to their play, where obviously CP3 brings a methodical nature and that's just who he has been for the last 18, 19 years. I think CP3's done a pretty good job of trying to fit into the Warriors system and obviously trying to get the best of both worlds with, what the Warriors traditionally do as a team and what CP3 also brings to the table from a personal perspective. But I do wonder whether or not you're looking at Podziemski now and thinking, this guy's capable of playing 20, 25 minutes a game. Can we use CP3's salary, 30 million, 30.8 million, to get another wing? I think would be the ideal thing, to get another forward. Maybe you're giving up Kuminga, maybe you're giving up future draft picks, and just getting something else, or even, and this would be tough, and I don't think Steph would enjoy. It'd be hard to go to Steph and say we're doing this. Could you just do it for luxury tax reasons and send out CP3's contract to? We had one on Blue Man Hoop the other day. Josh Cornelison did one where you're trading. I think it was CP3 to the Hornets for like Terry Rozier or something. And in that way, the Warriors are cutting down on like $7 million in salary, which in luxury tax is like $50 million kind of thing. And that obviously saves Joe Lacob a heap of money. Now, I think you would struggle to go to Steph and say, okay, we're going to trade Chris Paul for an inferior player, and just to save cash, because Steph's going to turn around and be like, hey, I'm in the prime of my career still. We're trying to win a championship. That's detracting from winning. So I think that would be difficult. I think there are some players on less than CP3's money that are equivalent value player or could be of more value to the Warriors in terms of position, where you could make the argument, okay, we're saving some money here, but we're also that this is actually helping us as a team. I've got my dream trade target for the Warriors. I might leave it till next episode, actually. Just a little floater out there. I've got there's one player, if I want it on the Warriors right now, that clearly is above any other potential realistic trade candidate. It's definitely not Pascal Siakam, and it's definitely not OG Anunoby, who continue to be linked. That Raptor forward pair continue to be linked with trades to the Warriors or any other team as we get closer to the deadline. I might leave that till next episode. But I do think that the whole Podziemski thing and his impact and his development early here in his career could be making Chris Paul more expendable. If it's not this season, then I certainly think the Warriors would look at Chris Paul's non-guaranteed contract for next season and be like, we're just clearly not picking that up. And we're not picking that up, one, because we don't want to pay you $30 million, but two, because we've got Brandin Podziemski. And we think he can be a pretty solid backup point guard from year two. Right now, they're not really keen on him being the backup, even with CP3 out, because Corey Joseph's still playing a little bit. But I mean, this guy's still going to get better, still going to get more experience. There's a long way to go in his NBA career. And yet right now, early on, he's having a huge impact to the point he's playing over 36 minutes yesterday. Unbelievable. Anyway, we'll finish it up there. Another 33, 34-minute episode. So thanks for everyone that's tuned in to this point. As I said before, I think the narrative and the outlook on the Warriors could be so much different if they'd even split these 6 games that they could have won. They could be 12-8. They could be 4th in the Western Conference. So I'm trying to hold positive here while also being realistic that they're 9-11 in the Western Conference. After a really positive 5-1 start, it's a disappointing position to be in, but there's still plenty of time. We're a quarter of the way into the season, and there has to be some optimism that the Warriors can hopefully go on another run here and get back up the standings. Other than that, if you haven't subscribed on the YouTube channel already, if you could please do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on Twitter. Other than that, I'll see you in the next episode.